At the end of 1970s, psychologist Dr. Geert Hofstede published his Cultural Dimensions model. Since then, it's become an internationally recognized standard for understanding cultural differences. He identified 6 dimensions that could distinguish one culture from another.
Mabuhay, I am Gino Caparros, BSHM 3A, and I will tackle about the Power Distance Index in the Singapore and Philippines. Power distance represents inequality, more versus less, but defined from below, not from above. Society's level of inequality is endorsed by the followers as much as by the leaders. A high power distance culture has people who accept the inequality of the power structure. The historical religion and cultural background of Singapore, like many Asian cultures, is closely tied to Confucianism. In Confucianism, the stability of society is vitally important. The societal stability is directly connected to the relationship between people and how a person's ranking in society affects this relationship. As a result, Singapore places a higher value on maintaining authority and respect within its organization. As we look for Singapore Power Distance Index, we can see that Singapore scores high on this dimension, which is 74. With a Confucian background, they normally have a syncretic approach to religion, which is also the dominant approach in Singapore. One of the key principles of Confucian teaching is the stability of society, which is based on an equal relationship between people. In Singapore, they believe that employees are expected to be told what to do, where they need to wait for the instruction before making an action. People in this country accept that there is power inequality. When we look for the Philippines, at a score of 94, the Philippines is a hierarchical society. This means that people accept a hierarchical order in which everybody has a place and which needs no further justification. Hierarchy in an organization is seen as reflecting inherent inequalities. Centralization is popular, subordinates expect to be told what to do, and the ideal boss is benevolent autocrat. Just like in the Philippines, where if you have no power or you're not in a position, you have no say on the things that they want for the country, and you have to do is to follow their order. For example, is between boss and the employee, where the employee needs to ask for approval of the boss before making a decision even if it's urgent, because employees tend to follow the order from the people above them, which is the boss, and they didn't let the employees to have a chance to give their suggestion or opinion. It's like you have more advantage in a lot of things if you have more power over people. In other words, if one already has the power, it doesn't matter much if people who have no power accept it or not.
Good day, I am Saliendra from BSHM 3A. So today, we're going to discuss about individualism and collectivism. So individualism is the habit or principle of being independent or self-reliant. So from the word individual or independent, ito yung kaya mo na i-handle yung sarili mo na hindi ka na dumidepende sa mas nakakarami or sa family mo. And collectivism, it is the art which created by a group of people rather than individual. So ito yung parang kailangan mo pa ng mga opinion ng iba or mas nakakarami at hindi mo pa kayang i-handle yung sarili mo. So, let's find out if Singapore and Philippines are individualism and collectivism. So, according to my research, Philippines and Singapore are both collectivism. So, it means people tend to be perceived as less selfish, or the needs of the family are prioritized over the needs of the individual. So it means na parang mas inuuna mo pa yung mas nakakarami or family mo kaya sa sarili mo. For example, gusto mong bumili ng bagong cellphone pero mas kailangan sa family mo ng mga pagkain, ng grocery. So mas uunahin mong bilhin yung grocery kaya sa bagong cellphone. And another example is magpapakasal ka. So pagkatapos ng kasal, mas gugustuhin mo pa rin pumisan sa family mo or sa biyanan mo kaysa magsarili ng bahay. So that's the meaning of collectivism.
Good morning guys, I am Palmado and I'm going to tackle about the masculinity of Singapore and Philippines. A high score or a masculine society on this dimension indicates that the society will be driven by the competition, achievements, and success, with success being defined by the winner or best in field, which is a value system that starts in school and continues through organizational life, while a low score or the feminine society on the dimension means that the dominant values in society are caring for others and quality of life. A feminine society is one where a quality of life is the sign of success and standing out from the crowd is not admirable. So, the fundamentals issue here is what motivates people wanting to be the best, which is the masculine, or liking to what you do, which is the feminine. So as we can see in the graph, the Philippines score 64 on the dimension and thus is a masculine society. And the masculine countries, people live in order to work. Managers are expected to be decisive and assertive. The emphasis is on equity, competition and performance, and conflicts are resolved by fighting them out. So now let's tackle about the Singapore, because we all know that the culture of Philippines is more on masculinity society. So the Singapore scores 48 on this dimension, and it means that Singapore is a feminine society. But before we focus on the Singapore's masculinity, let me give you an introduction about the Singapore. Because Singapore is such a culturally rich nation, it is an ideal place to study and practice Hofstede cultural dimension. And with thousands of people from different countries conducting business in Singapore, there are many different countries and national cultures represented within a relatively small country. So Singapore scores 48 and it is in the middle of the scale, but more on the feminine side, and it is exceptionally well balanced. Singapore's masculinity is characterized by its openness to trade and its highly competitive business environment. Singapore's femininity is characterized by the fact that it takes care of its people by offering subsidized housing and has programs to take care of the less fortunate, such as the universal health care system. So to sum up it all, the Singapore is a feminine society, which is the more nurturing aspect of society are encouraged, but not to the extent that competition and achievements are discouraged. This is also one of the reasons that Singapore is such an international hub, which is people from most cultures feel accepted, nurtured, and still challenged to reach their full potentials.
Good day and mabuhay! I am Javin Mercurio and I am here to tackle about the topic of uncertainty avoidance with the country of Singapore and Philippines. The Uncertainty Avoidance Index describes how well people can cope with anxiety. At the spectrum, the Singapore has the lowest score of an 8. This country is more open to change or innovation, more inclined to open under decision making, and has less sense of urgency, while the Philippines scores a 44. According to my research, a country like Singapore, in which the people in low uncertainty avoidance culture are much more relaxed in a new or unusual situation. They are happier with ambiguity and unresolved problems. In this kind of cultures, change in society can take place relatively quickly. So, let's have a look at the social norms. In high uncertainty avoidance country seems more conservatism, law and order, xenophobic attitudes, and they tend to express emotions more. On the other hand, the low uncertainty avoidance countries are more open to change and innovations. They show more tolerance towards diversity. However, they tend to suppress their emotions more. And that's all for my report.
Mabuhay! My name is Christy Mahinay, and in my part, we will be discussing about the differences between the Philippines versus Singapore in terms of or which among the two countries have long-term orientation or short-term orientation. So as we can see on the Hofstede insight or dimension, in this cultural dimension, which is the long-term orientation dimension, Singapore scores 72. This is relatively high score, and it indicates that Singapore places greater importance on long-term success and less emphasis on immediate material rewards. Singapore has worked hard towards perseverance and consistently investing in its future. In my opinion, Singaporeans are risk takers. At scores of 72, it shows that Singaporeans have cultural qualities like persistence, sustained efforts, slow results, thrifts, being sparse with resources, ordering relationship by status, and having a sense of shame. For example, in 2017, Singapore investment in education reached $12.9 billion, accounting for 17% of the country's total budget. Philippines scores 27 in this dimension, which means Philippines tends to be short-term orientation country. Filipinos focus on tradition, tends to standardized thinking, have no desire to invest in the future, and focus on achieving short-term results. Singapore also become one of the five dragons with an immense economic success. They emphasize virtue in the way in which things are done, always open for new options to arise. They have a pragmatic approach to business, believing that two things together can make something stronger versus being in opposition. This is because the priority of Singapore government has been to get things done. To this end, they have provided direction. However, instilling within the Singaporean mindset the need to get on and achieve goals has arguably given rise to an acquisitive instinct. Therefore, Singapore is a long-term orientation country.
So hello everyone, my name is Javin from BSHM3A, and I'm going to discuss about indulgence, and I'm going to compare the two countries, which are Philippines and Singapore. So before that, I'm going to discuss about indulgence. So this dimension is defined on the extent to which people try to control their desires and impulses based on the way they were raised, and relatively weak control is called indulgence, and relatively strong control is called restraint. Culture can therefore be described on indulgent or restraint. So in short, indulgence is referring about the satisfaction and fulfilling the happiness of a person, and when you say restraint is there are some hindrance, or there are some factors that controlling their happiness or satisfaction. So before I compare these two countries, based on my research, I just found out that these two countries are not more on indulgence. They are focusing and belong to restrained country, which means their happiness is focused on achievement rather than indulgence. So in the Philippines, we have Christianity, food, contentment, freedom, problem solve, celebrations, and social media. So we all know that in the Philippines, we are devoted to our Christianity and food, because our country is one of suffering from poverty and contentment. Filipinos are also known for being contented of what we have, and freedom, because there are some factors that lacking our freedom, and problem solve, celebrations, especially special holidays like Christmas and New Year's, and social media because we all know that in this modern world, we are all using social media. And for Singapore, we have efficiency, pace, harmony, Confucianism, discipline, motivation, cleanliness, and modesty. So with these factors, I just found out that people in Singapore are they are disciplined, physical appearance are big deal to them, and they cleanliness is their happiness, and also they are disciplined. So in conclusion, both countries are both belong to restraint. They are just different for the bases and factors.